Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here. In this video, we're checking out GameSir's brand new X2 Pro Xbox controller. Is this the best controller that GameSir has ever made? Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, GameSir sent me this X2 Pro for a fair and honest review, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. This controller is designed to use with your Android device. It's compatible with Android, you don't have to play Xbox games with it, but it is designed with Game Pass in mind. It connects to your phone via USB-C, it's not wireless, it's not Bluetooth. Now taking a look at the back of the box here, and there's something that immediately grabbed my attention: Hall effect analog triggers. So these triggers are analog, they're not digital, which means if you want to play a racing game and apply a bit of throttle instead of all out, you absolutely can. That's a huge step forward for GameSir. It's also got textured soft rubber grips and 2 mappable back buttons. On the other side of the box, we've got interchangeable ABXY buttons, we have Alps 3D joysticks, and one-click capture. Now looking inside the box, and the first thing we have here is the GameSir carrying case. It says X2 Pro right on the front of it. And inside this case are the rest of the goodies. On the top portion of the case here, we do have a mesh pouch, which you can use to store cables and accessories and whatever you want really. Inside this gaming is winning package are a number of different things. There is a quality control card, thumbstick grips, and 2 different sets of them, and a bunch of product information and a GameSir sticker. There's also a fairly robust user's manual with a bunch of different languages and about 6 pages of instruction per language, and a 1-month free trial to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, and this one expires at the end of August in 2024, so you have quite a bit of time to redeem it. And here's a closer look at the GameSir X2 Pro Xbox in all of its glory. This controller is sharp. I like the colorway on this one, and I like the extra addition of the Xbox button in the bottom right hand corner. Here's a closer look at the left hand side of the controller. The D-pad feels good, it's very clicky. The joystick itself also feels very good. And here's a better look at the right hand side of the controller. The ABXY buttons are clicky, they feel good, they don't feel cheap. The joystick on this side also feels good. And here's a better look at the Xbox button, which is also clicky. I think they went all out with micro switches on this one. Here's a look at the USB-C connector. It's flexible to help prevent damage to your phone. Here's a look at the bottom of the X2 Pro. They relocated the USB-C port to the bottom right hand corner. The back of the controller is also a little bit different compared with other GameSir controllers. We have M1 and M2 buttons. And here's a close-up view of the rubber textured grip. And here's a better look at the top of the controller. We've got L1 and L2, or LB and RB, as well as left trigger and right trigger, and these are triggers. And honestly here, these triggers feel great. They're smooth, they're comfortable to use, and they feel a lot better than I thought they were going to. Not that I didn't have my hopes up about them, but I was trying to maybe level set my expectations, and well, these exceeded them. My initial impressions are that this controller is pretty comfortable to hold. And here's the controller fully extended. Like other controllers with an extension, it does lose a little bit of stability, but it is still fairly stable. Overall, it's good for what it is. And to be honest with you, I have some fairly hefty experience with GameSir controllers. Here's the X2 Pro beside the X2 Bluetooth, beside the regular X2, and also the brand new X3. And here's a look at the back of every single one of these controllers. You can see the uniqueness of the X3 with that cooler, and you can see the uniqueness of the X2 Pro with those 2 back buttons, and also bigger back triggers. The X2 Pro is the only GameSir here that has analog triggers. And just for some fun, here's the GameSir X2 Pro beside the Moga XP7X. They're both designed for Xbox, they both cradle your phone, but there's a massive size difference between the two. And here's the bottom of the X2 Pro directly compared with the X2. You can see the difference in location for the USB-C charging port, as well as the USB-C port that attaches to your phone. The face buttons also appear to be considerably different. For testing the X2 Pro out, I'll be using the Red Magic 6R, and there is a ton of room for this phone to fit. You can see I've got the controller fully extended, and I can set it down and plug the USB-C port in, and there's still a ton of space. And for those of you wondering, yes, the X2 Pro supports pass-through charging. As soon as I plug the charging cable in, you can see it charging the phone. Here's a closer look at the overall fit of my phone in this controller, and you can see it's almost a perfect fit. The camera bump does fit into the cutout here, almost. You can see the top corner of the camera bump does make a little bit of contact with that back edge of the controller, and it does pop just a little bit in there. Nothing overly concerning though, because as you can see, the controller passed the shake test with flying colors. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about damaging my phone at this point, but it's all in the name of testing, the things I do for you. However, if you do twist the controller around quite a bit, yes, there's a chance your phone will pop out. It's also worth pointing out that I don't have a phone case on my phone when it's in this controller. If you do have a case, chances are it's not going to fit. Now moving on into testing out this controller, and the first thing I'm looking at is the D-pad. The D-pad is registering inputs correctly. It's registering diagonals without issue. It's registering everything I'm throwing at it. This is a very good D-pad, one of the better D-pads in Android controllers. If you're not a fan of the Xbox One D-pad, you probably won't like this D-pad, but I think it's great. The A, B, X, Y buttons also feel great and are also registering properly. The L1 and R buttons are also registering properly, and they feel just like all of the other GameSir controllers. Both joysticks are clicky, so they feature the L3 and R3 buttons, and clicking them in here doesn't really offset the joystick at all, so they are fairly accurate. And taking a look at the left joystick here, it is fairly sensitive. It does pop just a little bit on the screen when you move it forward just ever so slightly. But overall, this joystick is pretty accurate. There's not much of a dead zone, and it's extremely smooth. And fortunately, the exact same thing can be said about the right joystick. They're virtually identical. And here's a closer look at that slight popping when you move the joystick ever so slightly on screen. And now for the part a ton of you will be interested in, the analog triggers. You can see here right on screen, it's registering partial inputs. These are true analog triggers, and they are very good. Both L2 and R2 are smooth and accurate, and actually really nice to use. It is worth pointing out that fast flicking the joysticks is not resulting in an opposite movement, and that is really good. A lot of Android controllers have this problem where if you flick it, it will register in the opposite direction once it's done trying to recenter. Now, booting up Dolphin emulator, the first thing I had to do was confirm my input bindings, and you can see here Dolphin is recognizing it as a GameSir X2 Pro Xbox. This controller truly is plug and play. I plugged the controller into my phone and all of the apps are recognizing it. Oh, and the D-pad's good as well. I also had no issues whatsoever with the joysticks in game. They were smooth, they were easy to use, and I was happy with them. So let's get into what I liked, what I didn't like, and whether or not I'd recommend the GameSir X2 Pro Xbox controller, and we'll start out here with what I liked. So first and foremost, I love the overall look and feel of this controller. The buttons feel good, the joysticks feel good, the D-pad feels good. The analog triggers, yes, analog triggers feel good. That might be the second thing I like about this, the fact that it does have analog triggers. I also like the relocation of the charging port to the right-hand side, and the fact that it's got pass-through charging gets a big thumbs up. And the face buttons here are a little bit bigger than the X2, and I think that's a welcome change. And the last thing I like about this controller is the fact that the naming convention makes sense. They called this an X2 Pro. And that's exactly what I would call this. It's a little bit better than the X2, so X2 Pro. Now moving into things I don't like about the X2 Pro, and the first thing here is the fact that if you've got a phone case, you're going to have to take it off to use this controller. Chances are it's not going to fit in here very well with a phone case. I also didn't like that the camera bump on my phone didn't really fit in this groove the best. It was a little bit off, and that resulted in a little bit of popping, a little bit of grinding with my phone in the case. I'm also not a fan of the GameSir app. Some people love it, some people hate it. I find it a little bit clunky and unnecessary. I mean, you don't even need to use it to map these back buttons, which I guess is awesome. And it's also worth pointing out that this might be in some people's dislike category, but not in mine. This controller doesn't have rumble. So before I get into my overall recommendation, let's take a look at the price. Right now on GameSir's website, the X2 Pro is priced at $80 overall. That's about $20 to $30 more expensive than the X2. There are two different colorways, black and white. I reviewed the black one. At $80 overall, this is starting to put it into the more expensive category, but still cheaper than some of the competition. At $80, yes, I pointed this way, I meant this way. At $80, yes, I recommend the GameSir X2 Pro. Now, if you already have an X2, I wouldn't say upgrading to the X2 Pro is a necessity. But if you're looking at replacing your X2 or just a new controller in general, then yes, check out the X2 Pro. Anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. Shoutouts to GameSir for providing the X2 Pro for a fair and honest review. Let me know your thoughts about the X2 Pro in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos, don't tempt fate, save your state.